Men don't cry. That's what Richard Ashford said to his 7-year-old son while the boy sat on the bathroom floor with blood running from his nose, tears streaking through it like rivers through red clay. Stand up. The boy didn't stand up. He couldn't. His legs had stopped working the way legs stop working when the person who's supposed to protect you is the person who just hit you. I said, stand up, Daniel. Daniel Ashford pressed his back against the bathroom wall. The tile was cold. His pajamas, the ones with the rockets on them, were spotted with blood. His nose throbbed. His left eye was swelling shut. He was 7 years old, and the biggest man in his world was standing over him with a fist that still had his blood on the knuckles. "You were crying at dinner," Richard said. He crouched down. His suit didn't wrinkle. It never wrinkled. He was the kind of man whose clothes obeyed him the way everything else did. In front of the Harringtons, in front of people who matter, you cried because your steak had blood in it. "It was pink," Daniel whispered. "I don't like—" Richard grabbed his jaw, squeezed. The pressure sent lightning through Daniel's broken nose. "You don't like, you don't want, you don't feel." Richard's voice was a razor wrapped in velvet. "You're an Ashford. Ashfords don't cry at dinner tables. Ashfords don't embarrass their fathers in front of business partners. Ashfords eat what's put in front of them and they smile while they chew." He released Daniel's jaw, stood up, checked his reflection in the mirror, adjusted his tie. "Clean yourself up. Tell your mother you fell. If you tell her anything else, we'll have this conversation again. And next time, I'll use my belt." He walked out. The bathroom door clicked shut. Daniel sat on the tile and stared at the rockets on his pajamas. He didn't cry. He'd already learned the cost of that. Instead, he pressed toilet paper against his nose and waited for the bleeding to stop. The way he'd wait for it to stop 100 more times over the next 11 years. He was 7. He didn't understand what a judge was. He would. Quick favor. If you've ever been punished for having feelings by someone who should have been teaching you how to handle them, tap like and subscribe. Because Daniel Ashford spent his entire childhood learning how to be silent. And then he spent his adult life learning how to speak. In a courtroom, from a bench, with a gavel in his hand and his father's fate in the other. Richard Ashford was not a man. He was a machine that wore a man's face. Net worth, $860 million. Founder and CEO of Ashford Partners, a private equity firm that bought struggling companies, stripped them for parts, and sold the bones at a profit. He'd been profiled in Forbes twice, both times described as ruthlessly efficient. He kept the clippings framed in his office like hunting trophies. His wife, Catherine, had been beautiful once. By the time Daniel was 7, she was a ghost in Chanel, present at every dinner party, absent from every room that mattered. She took pills that made her eyes soft and her voice distant and her ability to see what was happening to her son exactly 0. "Your father loves you," she'd say, touching up her makeup in the hallway mirror while Daniel stood behind her with a bruise he was supposed to call a fall. "He just expects a lot." "He hit me, Mom." Catherine's hand paused on the mascara wand. "1 second. Then she continued. "You need to try harder, sweetheart. Don't provoke him. Don't provoke him. Don't cry. Don't speak. Don't want. Don't feel. Don't exist in any way that inconveniences the man with the fist." Daniel learned the rules. All of them. At 8, he learned that dropping a fork at dinner meant a backhand that split his lip. At 9, he learned that getting a B+ meant being locked in the basement closet for 4 hours with the light off. At 10, he learned that flinching when his father raised his hand meant the hand came down harder, because flinching was weakness. And weakness was the only sin Richard Ashford recognized. At 11, he learned that telling a school counselor meant a $200,000 donation to the school, and a counselor who suddenly couldn't remember the conversation. At 12, Daniel stopped learning lessons. He started keeping records, a notebook. Small, black, the kind you buy at a drugstore for $2.99. He kept it under his mattress, then in a loose board in his closet, then in a locker at the public library 4 blocks from the school, because Richard searched his room every Sunday the way wardens search cells. He wrote everything: dates, descriptions, locations on his body. What Richard said before and after. What Catherine didn't say. What the housekeeper Maria saw through doorways and pretended not to. He wrote in code at first. Abbreviations, symbols, a system a 12-year-old invented because he understood instinctively that evidence was meaningless without protection, and protection was meaningless without patience. He didn't know he was building a case. He thought he was surviving, but the notebook was both. Why do you write so much? Maya Chen, 13. Daniel's only friend, though he would have denied having one if asked. She sat across from him in the library, watching him write with the focus of someone defusing a bomb. School stuff, Daniel said. That's not school stuff. You don't take notes like that for school. You take notes like that for... She stopped, looked at him more carefully. At the long-sleeve shirt he wore in June. At the way he held his pencil. Left-handed, even though he was right-handed because his right wrist was swollen again. Daniel, what's going on at home? Nothing. You're lying. I'm fine, Maya. You're wearing a turtleneck in summer. Daniel looked at her. She had the kind of eyes that didn't let you hide, not because they were aggressive, but because they were honest. And honesty has a way of making walls feel thin. If I told you, he said quietly, you couldn't help. Nobody can help. He's too rich. He's too connected. The last person I told got paid to forget. Maya was quiet for a moment. Then she said something Daniel would remember for the rest of his life. You won't be 12 forever. He looked at her. You'll grow up, she said. And when you do, you'll be able to do something about it. But you need to be alive when that happens. So whatever you're doing to survive, keep doing it. Daniel looked at the notebook, at the coded entries that documented every blow, every threat, every night in the closet. I'm keeping a record, he said. Good, Maya said. Don't stop. He didn't stop. Tap like if you believe that the children who survive monsters become the adults who destroy them, because Daniel Ashford was about to grow up. And Richard Ashford had no idea what was coming. The hitting stopped when Daniel was 16. Not because Richard grew a conscience, because Daniel grew 6 inches in one summer, put on 40 pounds of muscle from a boxing gym he'd joined without his father's permission, and one night, the night Richard came at him with a belt for leaving a light on, Daniel caught the belt mid-swing. He didn't hit back. He didn't need to. He held the belt and looked at his father and said one word. No. Richard stared at the hand holding his belt. At the boy. No, not a boy anymore. Standing in front of him with shoulders wider than his own and eyes that didn't flinch. Let go, Richard said. No. I said, I heard you. Daniel's voice was steady, dead calm. The voice of someone who'd spent 9 years learning how to survive without making a sound and had finally decided to break the silence on his own terms. You're not going to hit me again. Not tonight. Not ever. If you try, I'll hit you back. And I won't stop. Richard's face went through something Daniel had never seen before. A flicker of fear, quickly buried under rage, then calculation. You threaten me in my house? I'm telling you what's going to happen. The way you've been telling me what's going to happen since I was 7. Richard dropped his end of the belt, stepped back, smoothed his shirt. You're just like your mother, he said. Weak. Emotional. Mom's not weak. She's medicated. Because living with you requires it. Richard's jaw clenched. When you turn 18, you're out of this house. I'm counting the days. Daniel turned and walked to his room. He locked the door, a lock he'd installed himself with tools he'd bought with money he'd earned at the boxing gym, because asking Richard for anything was a debt he refused to carry. He sat on his bed. His hands were shaking, not from fear. From the chemical aftermath of standing in front of a man who'd broken his nose at 7 and saying no for the first time in his life. He opened the notebook, flipped to the last page. Wrote, April 14th. He came at me with the belt. I stopped him. He won't hit me again, but he'll hit someone. Men like him always find someone. He was right. After Daniel left, Richard turned his attention to Catherine. The hits weren't as hard. Catherine was smaller, quieter, more compliant. But they were consistent. A shove when dinner was late, a slap when she contradicted him at a party, a grip on her arm that left fingerprints she covered with bracelets. Maria, the housekeeper, called Daniel at college. "It's getting worse," she whispered. She was calling from the laundry room, the only place in the house without cameras. Last week, he pushed her into the kitchen counter. She told the doctor she slipped. "Document everything," Daniel said. "Dates, photos if you can get them. Don't confront him. Don't let him know you're watching." "I'm scared, Daniel." "I know, but I need time. I'm building something." He was. He'd chosen his path at 17, the day he watched a domestic violence trial and saw a judge sentence a rich man to 8 years. The man had money, lawyers, connections. None of it mattered. The judge looked at the evidence and delivered a consequence that no amount of wealth could buy off. Columbia undergrad, Yale Law, top 5, DA's office, domestic violence cases exclusively for 7 years. He prosecuted hedge fund managers, surgeons, a state senator. 31 convictions, each one a rehearsal. At 33, appointed to the bench. Youngest criminal court judge in the state. Richard called. "Judge Ashford," he said. The pride in his voice was the kind you'd use for a trophy. Not the child, but the achievement. The brand. "I always knew you had it in you." "You beat it into me," Daniel said. Silence.
The evidence presented today
That's ancient
confirms the
history,
timeline
Daniel.
established by
You
the
turned out
witness.
fine. Better than fine. You should be thanking me. I should be indicting you. Richard laughed. The same sharp, dismissive laugh he'd used when Daniel was a child. Always so dramatic. Just like your mother. "How is Mom?" "She's fine. She's always fine." "She's not fine. Maria calls me every week. I know about the kitchen counter. I know about the arm. I know about the black eye she told the neighbors was a fall." Richard's voice went cold. "Maria needs to mind her business. Maria is the only person in that house with a conscience." "I'm not having this conversation." "You will," Daniel said. "Eventually." The line went dead. 2 years later, the call came. Daniel was in his chambers reviewing a sentencing brief when his clerk knocked. "Judge Ashford, there's an emergency filing. Domestic violence. Arraignment needs to happen today." "Who's the defendant?" The clerk hesitated, looked at the file, looked at Daniel. "Richard Ashford." The world tilted. Not dramatically, just a small, precise shift, the way a compass needle moves when the magnetic field changes. "What happened?" Daniel's voice didn't break, didn't shake. 28 years of practice. His wife, your mother, was admitted to St. Joseph's last night. Multiple contusions, fractured orbital bone, 3 broken fingers. She told the ER nurse her husband did it. The nurse called police.
The evidence presented today
Officers
confirms
responded,
the timeline
found evidence of
established by the
assault at the
witness.
residence, and arrested Mr. Ashford at 2 a.m. Daniel closed the sentencing brief, set it aside, folded his hands on the desk. "I should recuse myself." "Yes, Your Honor. Obviously." "Get me the case file first." He read it in 11 minutes, the police report. The photographs, Catherine's face, swollen, purple, barely recognizable as the woman who'd applied mascara while her son bled in the hallway. The ER nurse's statement. Maria's witness statement. She'd finally talked. 14 years of observations, dates, descriptions. The bruises she'd photographed with her phone when Catherine was sleeping. Maria's records matched Daniel's notebook almost perfectly. The same patterns, the same escalation cycle, the same careful calibration of violence. Never in public, never where it could be seen by anyone who mattered. Always followed by gifts and apologies and the performance of normalcy. Daniel closed the file, sat in silence for a long time. Then he picked up the phone and called the presiding judge. "I'm recusing myself from the Ashford case," he said. "Conflict of interest. The defendant is my father." "Understood. I'll reassign. One more thing. I'd like to be listed as a witness for the prosecution." The pause lasted 5 seconds. "You want to testify against your own father?" "I've been preparing to testify against my own father since I was 12 years old." "If you've ever
evidence
watched someone
presented
finally
today
get the
confirms
chance to
the
speak the
timeline
truth they've been
established by the
carrying since
witness."
childhood. Stay with me. Because what Daniel said on that witness stand made Richard Ashford's $400 an hour lawyers look like children who'd brought toy swords to a real war. The trial drew attention, not because domestic violence trials were rare. They weren't. Because the defendant was Richard Ashford. Forbes profile, charity galas, the name on a hospital wing and a university library. A man the world had decided was important. His legal team was a wall of gray suits and legal pads. 4 attorneys from Whitaker, Stern, and Cole, the most expensive defense firm in the state. They filed motions to suppress, motions to exclude, motions to limit testimony, motions to paint Catherine as unstable, medicated, unreliable. "Mrs. Ashford has a documented history of prescription drug use," the lead attorney argued. "Her perception of events is compromised." The prosecutor, a woman named Karen Wells, who'd spent 20 years in domestic violence cases and had no patience for men who could afford to hide, responded without standing up. "Mrs. Ashford takes prescription medication because her husband has been beating her for 30 years. The medication is a symptom of the abuse, not a defense against its documentation." The judge, Honorable Patricia Navarro, a woman Daniel respected more than anyone on the bench, sustained the prosecutor's objection and told the defense to find a different strategy or sit down.
The evidence presented
Catherine
today
testified
confirms the
first.
timeline established
She was
by the witness.
61. She looked 80. She sat in the witness box with her hands folded, her face still showing the yellow-green remnants of the bruises, and she spoke in the flat, careful voice of a woman who'd spent 3 decades choosing every word for survival value. "When did the abuse begin?" Karen Wells asked. "Before Daniel was born. We'd been married 2 years. I burned a roast. He threw the pan. It hit my shoulder." "And it continued?" "It never stopped. It just changed shape. Sometimes it was hitting, sometimes it was grabbing, sometimes it was just standing over me, making himself big, reminding me that I was small." "Did you ever try to leave?" Catherine's hands tightened. "Once. Daniel was 5. I packed a bag. Richard found it. He sat me down at the kitchen table and explained, very calmly, very clearly, what would happen if I left. He would take Daniel. He would destroy my reputation. He would make sure no court in the state gave me custody because his lawyers were better than any lawyer I could afford. And I believed him. Because he was right." "Why are you speaking now?" Catherine looked at her husband. Richard sat at the defense table in a suit that cost more than Catherine's monthly alimony, his face arranged in an expression of patient suffering. The wounded patriarch, the misunderstood provider. "Because my son showed me it was possible," Catherine whispered. He said no. When he was 16, he looked at his father and said no. "I've been trying to say it ever since." Maria testified next. 14 years of employment. 14 years of evidence. Photos, dates, descriptions, a parallel record that corroborated Daniel's notebook and Catherine's testimony with the precision of a woman who'd been trained as a nurse before she became a housekeeper. "I saw things through doors," Maria said. "I heard things through walls. I cleaned blood off bathroom tiles, and I told myself it wasn't my business. But it was. It was everybody's business. I just didn't have the courage to say it until now." Then Daniel took the stand. The courtroom shifted when he entered the witness box. Not because he was famous, though he was in legal circles, because the dynamic was unprecedented. A sitting judge testifying against his own father in a case that mirrored the childhood he'd spent 28 years building the strength to confront. He wore a dark suit. No tie. He wanted the jury to see him as a person, not a position. Karen Wells began gently. Judge Ashford, what is your relationship to the defendant? He's my father. And can you describe your childhood in the Ashford household? Daniel looked at Richard. His father stared back with those calculating eyes. The same eyes that had watched a 7-year-old bleed on a bathroom floor and felt nothing. When I was 7, Daniel said, I cried at dinner because my steak was too rare. My father took me to the bathroom, hit me in the face hard enough to break my nose, and told me that men don't cry. The courtroom went silent. He told me to tell my mother I fell. He said if I told her the truth, he'd use his belt next time. I believed him because the next time, when I was 8, he did use the belt. Did the abuse continue? Until I was 16. 9 years. Hitting, slapping, kicking, grabbing, being locked in a closet in the dark for hours, having my belongings destroyed as punishment, being told I was weak, worthless, a disappointment, being told that I deserved it. Did you ever tell anyone? I told a school counselor when I was 11. My father donated $200,000 to the school the following month. The counselor never spoke to me again. Objection. The defense attorney stood. This is hearsay, and speculation regarding the motive behind a charitable donation. I have the donation receipt, Daniel said calmly, dated 11 days after my counselor meeting. I also have the counselor's original intake notes, obtained through a records request 6 years ago. She documented bruising on my arms and face. Her follow-up notes, filed after the donation, say, student reports resolved family conflict. No further action needed. The defense attorney sat down. Judge Ashford, Karen continued, you kept a notebook as a child. Can you tell the court about it? Daniel reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small black notebook. The same one. 23 years old. The cover was soft from handling, the pages yellowed, the pencil fading but legible. I started this when I was 12, he said. I documented every incident of abuse I experienced or witnessed in the Ashford household. Dates, descriptions, injuries, what was said before and after. I wrote in code because my father searched my room every Sunday. He opened it, read from the first entry. September 3rd, hit in the face, right eye. Steak was wrong. Mom didn't see. Told to say I fell. He turned pages. November 17th, belt, back and legs. Left a light on in the bathroom. 4 marks, wore long sleeves for 2 weeks. He turned more pages. March 8th, locked in the basement closet. 4 hours, dark, no reason given. He said I looked at him wrong. Daniel closed the notebook, set it on the railing of the witness box. There are 147 entries in this notebook. Every one is a date I was assaulted by my father. I was between 12 and 16 years old. He looked at the jury. 12 faces, some crying, some rigid with anger, all locked onto the notebook like it was a grenade with the pin pulled. I became a judge because of this notebook, Daniel said. Because when I was 12, I understood that the only thing standing between powerful men and the people they hurt is evidence and the courage to present it. I've spent my career prosecuting men who do what my father does. Men who use money and status and fear to erase the damage they cause. I've put 31 of them in prison. He looked at Richard. I never thought number 32 would be my father, but here we are. Richard's defense team cross-examined for 90 minutes. They questioned the notebook's authenticity, suggested fabrication, hired a handwriting expert. Karen Wells recalled Daniel. The defense suggests your notebook was fabricated. How do you respond? Each entry corresponds to a date I was absent from school or seen by medical professionals. I've cross-referenced every entry with attendance records and pediatric files. And Dr. Hendricks, the physician my father kept on retainer, is prepared to testify under immunity that he treated me for injuries on at least 30 occasions and was instructed each time to record the cause as accidental. Dr. Hendricks took the stand the next morning. 68, hands shaking. He didn't look at Richard. I knew from the first visit, a 7-year-old with a broken nose. Falls don't produce that kind of fracture. A fist does. Why didn't you report it? Because Richard Ashford paid me $300,000 a year to not report it. He owned my office building. He co-signed my daughter's college loans. And now? Now a boy I failed is sitting in a courtroom as a judge, doing what I should have done 28 years ago. The least I can do is tell the truth. The jury deliberated for 2 hours and 40 minutes. Guilty. All counts. Felony domestic assault. Child abuse.
The
Witness
evidence presented
tampering.
today confirms the timeline
Richard stood
established by the
motionless when the
witness.
verdict was read. His lawyers whispered. He didn't hear them. He was looking at Daniel. Daniel was sitting in the gallery, not on the bench, not in the witness box, just in the audience. A son watching his father receive the consequence he'd spent a lifetime avoiding. Richard's expression wasn't fear. It wasn't shame. It was confusion. The genuine, destabilizing confusion of a man who had always believed that money was the final word in every argument, and who was now discovering that the law had a vocabulary he couldn't buy. Sentencing came 3 weeks later. Judge Navarro delivered it. Mr. Ashford, you are a man of extraordinary privilege. You used that privilege not to protect your family, but to imprison them. Physically, emotionally, financially. You broke your son's nose when he was 7 years old because he cried at dinner. You spent the next 28 years believing that the silence you purchased was the same as innocence. She paused. It is not. Silence is not forgiveness. Money is not absolution. And a courtroom is the one room in this country where your net worth does not determine the outcome. 12 years. No parole eligibility for 8. Richard was handcuffed. Let out. The door closed behind him with a sound that Daniel had waited 28 years to hear. The sound of a lock engaging on the right side. Catherine filed for divorce the same week. The prenup was
The
voided.
evidence presented today
Coercion
confirms
invalidated
the
it.
timeline established by the witness.
She received the house, the accounts, and everything she'd earned through 30 years of silence. Maria received a settlement and an apology from Catherine that was late but genuine. Daniel didn't celebrate. There was no champagne moment, no dramatic speech on the courthouse steps. He went home to his apartment, a one-bedroom in the city, clean and simple and entirely his, and sat at his desk. He opened the notebook, turned to the last page, the one he'd written at 16, the night he'd caught the belt. He won't hit me again, but he'll hit someone. Men like him always find someone. Below it, he wrote one more line. The last entry, 23 years after the first. He found someone, and someone found him. He closed the notebook, put it in the desk drawer, didn't lock it. He didn't need to anymore. Maya called that evening. She'd seen the verdict on the news. You okay? She asked. I don't know. I thought I'd feel... I don't know. Vindicated. Relieved. Something clean. What do you feel? Daniel thought about it. Tired. Like I've been holding something for 28 years, and I finally put it down, and now my arms don't know what to do. They'll figure it out, Maya said. You figured out everything else? You told me I wouldn't be 12 forever. I was 13. I was very wise for my age. He laughed. It sounded strange in his apartment.
The evidence presented
A
today
sound that
confirms
space
the
hadn't heard much
timeline
of.
established by the witness.
Thank you, Maya, for saying what you said in that library, for seeing me. You were pretty easy to see, Daniel. You just needed someone who was actually looking. He hung up, sat in the quiet. The city moved outside his window. Traffic, voices, the hum of a world that didn't know or care that a man who'd spent his life hitting people smaller than himself was now behind a door he couldn't open. Daniel Ashford picked up a glass of water, held it, watched the surface, perfectly still, perfectly clear. He drank it without thinking about whether it would make someone angry. And for the first time since he was 7 years old, that was enough.